Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Topher Morrison with us today. He's into pitch development for business leaders. We're going to talk about that today. He's got huge experience into it. He's been public speaking for the past 35 years. So I guess he's got a thing or two to teach us. He's been the managing director at Personify as well. And is an advisor at Fathom, the recorder that you have on your Zoom calls. Cool company, cool YC company. This pod is presented to you by podpire.com. If you want to start or scale a podcast, go to podpire.com. Toffer, welcome to the pods. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thanks, Charles. Well, you pretty much summed it up. I've been a professional speaker for the past 35 years, but the mainstay is I focus on pitch development. My company, Personify, specializes in pitch development for business leaders that have to communicate what they do with clarity and credibility. One of the biggest challenges I think that most business owners face in the world of entrepreneurship is they never have taken the time to step out from their business and craft a perfectly repeatable pitch that they can deliver consistently in such a way that it doesn't sound like they're, memorizing or repeating something that they've memorized, but it just sounds natural and kind of flows off the top of their tongue, if you will. And the result is that is just massive inconsistency, right? Sometimes they pitched horribly, sometimes they hit a home run, but even if they hit a home run, they don't know how to duplicate it because they don't know what they did to make it such a success. We hopefully try to eliminate that, and we'll cover some of those topics here today to make sure that when people are going out and they're pitching, they're covering the things they need to, and they're doing it in a way that people can understand.
Right. The only thing I don't like about pitching is that it sounds like a pitch, and I think that's like a human fallacy. It's like, oh, okay, he practiced that and he's trying to get me into something. What do you have to say about that?
Like anything in life, if you look at like the bell curve of life, right? Um, when people get a pitch and they start to memorize it, there's going to be this whole place of awkwardness where they just can't quite make it sound natural. They can't make it sound normal. And so what happens is they typically give up right here. And because they give up, then they never get past that to where once they get over that hump, then I think you can actually deliver a memorized pitch, but it doesn't sound scripted. It doesn't sound rehearsed. It just sounds natural because when you do that, what happens is, well, like once you've rehearsed it so many times, you don't have to think about what you're saying. That gives you the ability to think 5, 6, 7, 8 words ahead, and then you can improvise. You can make up little changes. You can even insert little human mistakes, little ums and ahs to make it sound a little bit more natural. But I gotta say though, if I had to pick between sounding rehearsed or memorized, or sounding like I don't know what the hell I'm doing, I would pick memorized any given day over that one.
100% same here. Okay, so I have been in sales for the past 15 years. I've been pitching probably quote unquote pitching, right? 15 to
Yeah,
20 times a day.
yeah,
For yeah, that's like 2000 ish times. So that's a big number. Yeah, must have pitched people, yeah, about 50,000 times in that amount of time. So it comes natural to me, but that's not how most people operate. Most people are not salespeople. They come from whatever background, a technical background, and so forth. So to me,
yeah.
at this point, it's second nature. But I still love nerding out on keywords that my audience use. I observe the market data, what it's giving to me, and sometimes I'm adding these keywords to my pitch.
Yeah.
Whether it's through cold email, whether it's when I have people on the call, whether it's for my podcast. I like observing etymology and dissecting what keywords are trendy at the moment right now. And the feedback part, once I use these words, it's sometimes a bit hard to calculate if this word is great or not. Obviously, if I get like, the use of this keyword, it doesn't sound good, then I might remove it if I get it 10 times. But how does one actually get the feedback from their market and see if their pitch is good or not?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've got a science to this, my friend, but I could probably hang out with you and learn a little bit about looking into keywords and see how that works. I have a far less official approach to that, which is you have to pay more attention to the person you're pitching to than the pitch you're delivering. And this goes right back to that aspect of just being rehearsed and practiced, right? Like you just said, you've delivered your pitch 20,000 some odd times. So you don't have to really conceptualize and think about what you're going to say. And as a result of that, you can be present, you can be focused on the person. One of my favorite stories about this was a guy here in Tampa, Florida. I worked with him on his pitch. He was a photographer. His name is Mike McCoy, and he took pitching to heart, man. This guy, I told him, I said, anytime you're within arm's reach of somebody, pitch him. I don't care if they want to listen or not. Just practice it as many times. And he did, man. He delivered this pitch probably 1,000 times. And it was interesting because in his pitch, the original pitch, he had a phrase, and the phrase was, I'll see if I can remember it. It was something to the effect of, I noticed there was a big difference between your average corporate headshot and a celebrity headshot. And every time he would say that, he started to notice that the people that he was saying it to would kind of like lose him. Like they would go, and they would just have that little crown in the eyebrows, right? And so he knew that that wasn't quite right, but he didn't know what it was. And so he started playing around with it. And I never forget, he calls me up. He goes, I got it, Topher, I've got it. He goes, I needed to change the association. He goes, I was talking about how there's a difference between a corporate headshot and a celebrity headshot. And then people would say, well, I don't want to look like a celebrity. And he goes, so I realized it wasn't that. He goes, I realized I changed my pitch to, I realized there was a difference between how people responded to a corporate headshot versus how they responded to a celebrity headshot. And just inserting the word responded to, right, made all the difference in the world. He would have never been able to get to that level of precision in his pitch if he was still in his head kind of trying to remember what he had to say. But he was just so good. He was able to be present and just pay attention to that person. So I'd say the first thing is pay attention to the people looking at you and what kind of a facial expression are they giving? Like I'm watching you and you're like with me, you're getting this, your head's up and down. Whereas if I were talking right now and you were going, I'd be going, oh man, I'm off. I'm off. I've got to fix something, right? So, but again, you're not going to be able to pay attention to somebody if you're still paying attention to what you're trying to say.
Right. And my brain was thinking, what if he changed from celebrity to just Forbes cover? What do you think about that?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I should check it out.
Because it's
Yeah, I
business
don't know.
reference, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
still the quote unquote celebrity. So
yeah,
best of
yeah,
both
absolutely.
worlds.
He's still a friend of mine today. I'll have to run it by him and say, hey, think about throwing this one out. Yeah.
Just that Forbes has lost some feathers lately with like SBF being on the cover and Elizabeth Holmes,
Yeah,
so
it seems like when they like to feature a tech giant, that tech giant goes to jail.
right. Now, podcasting, um, how does one ask great questions?
Oh, well, there's a great question there. I think with regard to asking questions, I think one of the key mistakes a lot of people make, and I'm not saying this to put you on the spot at all, by the way, because you've already demonstrated that you don't do this. Like, I think it's great to have a pre-listed set of questions. You want to go into a podcast prepared, you want to go into an interview prepared, a sales presentation prepared, right? You have all the preconceived questions. But to follow those questions, song, letter, and verse, I think is always a mistake. And I think probably one of the most obvious places I've seen this actually is when you look at moderators of panels at conventions and they have these list of pre-listed questions that they're asking the panel. It's just horrible because 9 times out of 10, they say something in the first question or they answer something in the first question, which is the answer to the fourth question. And then the person just reads it off and it looks like they're not paying attention. So what I always say is that, uh, like we talk about follow-up questions, right? Like, so there's a question. I always say follow-up questions are great, but bounce-off questions are even better. So bounce-off question would be after you've asked one of your pre-created questions, and then you take some of the content from the answer that the person has given you, and you bounce off of that. You say, well, let's talk about that more. And then you go into that topic, and that allows you to go down these tunnels in conversations, which are more natural. They're more real. Like, think about it, Charles. I bet you it's happened to you tons of times where you're hanging out with your buddies, you're talking about one thing, and then as the conversation goes, at some point in time, you guys pause and you go, how the hell did we get on this topic? Right? Like, you just like, you don't even know how that
I wish
association
I'd said
happened.
yes, but I have such a great memory as a biohacker that I'm always the guy remembering what we were talking about.
All right. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. But it happens all the time, right? You want conversations to go down that kind of that route. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. The rabbit hole is essential. It's I call it the serotonin chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nowadays, I just love reading Wikipedia article and saving the next article, saving the next article. And then, if you would ask me the question how I got to this random article reading about how barbed wire changed America, I couldn't answer you why. It's probably because I studied steel magnets and Andrew Carnegie, and I studied before Andrew Carnegie, Andrew Mellon, for example, which is a recommended read. Now, I want to ask you when it comes to pitching, there's various forms of pitch. There's startup pitch, there's sales pitch, there's pitching on stage, there's webinars. Which
Yeah.
one is your favorite area, or do they
Yeah.
all share one commonality?
Well, that's a very good question. I focus on five pitches in my business. I focus on the elevator pitch, the party pitch, the sales pitch, the investor pitch, and the media pitch. So I'll unpack those. The elevator pitch, you know that one. The party pitch would be the one where you've got your drink in your hand, and you're at an environment going, "Hey, what do you do?" You're at a party, right? Um, the sales pitch, that's obvious when you're trying to get somebody to buy something. The investor pitch is used for two reasons. Number one, when you're trying to get VC capital or some kind of investment capital. But the other time an investment pitch works really well, and a lot of people don't think about it this way, is when you're trying to hire employees. But think about it, right? When you're trying to hire an employee, you're essentially trying to convince that person to spend about a third of their life with you. That's a hell of an investment, right? So the investor pitch works really good for also applications. And then the media pitch is how do you appeal to the press to make sure they want to coverage you and give you free press? Out of those, the one that I think I like the most is the party pitch.
And it's the hardest one to me personally because I don't do much physical stuff.
Yeah.
At my wedding, we had a couple of people say pitch that weren't that good, in my opinion. And I was quote unquote unprepared, said some things at the mic that maybe I shouldn't have said. So, yeah, what are your recommendations for in-person event pitches? It's like, thank you everyone for being here. You tell a story, you relate
Yeah.
to their emotions. Me, I think in terms of percentage, so something that I can connect with 80% of the room there.
Yeah.
Um, Once the story is told, you bring it back to the hook and what you want out of this pitch, what kind of effect you want to leave, and you
Yeah.
end up with some kind of conclusion. Would that
Yeah.
be a good framework?
Yeah, it would be. I would probably throw that as more of a speech than a pitch necessarily. We could split hairs on whether or not they're the same thing. But when delivering speeches to the public, there's one book that I really recommend. It's called Before You Say Anything. Let me see if I can pull up the author's name here for you. Um, Before You Say Anything. Let's see if I can get her name here. I just did a book review on this book too. Um, Victoria Wellman. She's a speechwriter out of New York, and she's an amazing speechwriter. I love her book, and she talks about how to write those kind of pitches or speeches at a party. For me, a party pitch would still be talking about my business, but doing it in the context of a picnic or a networking event or some sort of a party where you don't want to come across as a sleazy salesperson and be too in their face, but you still want to make sure you're networking and getting your name out there because you never know who's in the crowd that you might meet that knows that person that wants to introduce you to somebody else. So that's for me, that's the party pitch. And what I try to do is I try to cover 8 things inside a party pitch that can be delivered in any order based upon the questions that the person asks me at the party, because I never want to assume that somebody wants to listen to all 8 of those things right away. So I try to break them into really bite-sized pieces. Each one of them are their own independent thought that can stand on their own without anything before it or after it. So that if that person asks me a question, I go, oh, that's a credibility question. I can bring up the credibility piece of my pitch. If it's a motivation question, I can bring up my compelling why. If it's a clarity question, I can bring up my elevator pitch. And I just have these little things prepared for any type of a question that I might get at some sort of a social event.
You get pitched every day on LinkedIn and via cold email. What makes a good pitch in there?
Okay, great. What makes a good pitch good pitch? Let's start with what makes a bad pitch, and then we'll switch over to a good one. I think probably some of the worst things to do in pitching is to try to be cute and try to be memorable. it's better to be repeatable because if somebody can repeat your pitch, they remember it. But if you're memorable, they may embellish it, right? So I'll give you an example. I met this person one time at a party, and they told me they were a cranial prosthetic engineer. Charles, I don't know about you, but I was intimidated, right? Like, wouldn't you be intimidated? You meet somebody who's a cranial prosthetic engineer, you're like, whoa, this sounds like this kind of important person, right? And so I didn't even know really how to respond or ask anything about this guy's profession until I found out what it really was. Do you want to guess what he did?
Cranial engineer, that's like, yeah, cranes. But yeah, at first I thought like crane, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he's
He
like
made
he's building these huge cranes that construct buildings,
no,
no?
no, he makes wigs. He said it was a cranial
Oh,
prosthetic,
so like
like a
crane.
cranial,
Okay.
yeah, prosthetics. And I'm just like, just say you make a friggin' wig, dude. Don't try to like make it like you talk to these car salespeople, right? And they go, I'm an automotive specialist that specializes in getting dynamic individuals from where they want to be to where they want to go. I'm just like, no, man, just say you sell cars. Make it repeatable, right? So it's better to
Right.
be repeatable than it is memorable because if they can repeat it, they can remember it. And the beautiful thing about repeatability is now you've actually unwittingly recruited a salesperson for you because if they can repeat what you do and they want to talk to other people, they can deliver that pitch as well. So a bad pitch is something that's cutesy, tries to make yourself sound more important than you really are, and tries to be funny and memorable. A better pitch is something clean, simple, and repeatable. That's what makes a great pitch. Great pitch.
That one's memorable. The cranial engineer, like, dude. Um, yeah, and it first humans love understanding, right? Every time there's a neuron that connects, you get this serotonin shot. That's one. And two, if people understand that you invented a title to make yourself sound better, then it's like major turnoff. Um,
Well, yeah. It kind of presupposes then that when you're selling your product, you're going to inflate that as well.
yeah,
Like it's like, well, if they've made their job title sound so impressive, they're probably overselling their product or service too.
yeah, they are. Okay, now let's take what you're doing nowadays. I'm guessing you're rolling on a roster of around 10 to 15 clients on a yearly basis.
It depends upon what the service is. With regard to the pitch development, yeah, I'm hitting probably less than 10. Yeah.
Is that 80% of your time spent nowadays?
Well, that's almost probably an entry point at this one. So one of the things that I've done this past year, I've actually been ever since COVID, I've kind of just slowed down a lot, to be honest, Charles. I've just kind of enjoyed that. I had ran for public office back in 2019, and then that needed me to just after that campaign, I wanted to just disappear from the public. And right when I was ready to pop my head back up, COVID hit, and I'm like, oh, I'll just stay down a little bit longer. So I've still been in kind of caveman mode. But during that time, I actually created 1,000 square foot broadcast studio. So I've been spending a lot of my energy now. Like once I work with somebody on their pitch, then I can get them into the studio and we can do a lot of media consulting, get them making online content and stuff like that. So I've been having a lot more fun doing that. Um, and I also went back to school and got my MBA. So I was spending a lot of time doing that. Now I've graduated. It's time for me to get off my butt and get back to work. So it should pick up now. I
Okay,
had
I'll
two
pick
pitching
up.
clients this week. So yeah.
I have like other question to ask about your day today, but why the MBA?
Uh, yeah, no, this is going to turn into a psychological show. I should go lay on the couch with my dog.
Yeah, you should.
After I lost the election that I ran for, like nothing will help you, nothing will bring up all your insecurities in life than public failure, right? And so after that campaign, I thought, well, if I ever want to run again, what could I do to show the public that I'm bettering myself? And one of the things that came up to me over and over during the debates was I was competing against all these people that were lawyers. They'd had their fancy degrees, right? And I never had a formal degree. And so I kind of always like for me it was an insecurity. And I thought, okay, I'm old enough now. I got to stop using these excuses. And so I thought, why don't I just go back to school and get the damn degree? So I was just kind of at the right time in the right place. So I thought I'm going to scratch this itch and feel this mental insecurity and go and say that I have a degree now. So I went back to school.
Little trip to Oxford.
Indeed, yeah, yeah. In fact, and as a result, I fell in love with that place, and I go there. I'm heading over there again next week. So
Yeah, who wouldn't? I mean, how many legends studied at Oxford?
dude, it's such a cool place. It sounds like you appreciate history, by the way, and it's the whole city is just filled with these iconic work. Like I just found out a couple of weeks ago on World International Book Day or whatever it was, the Bible was translated at Oxford into English. It was an Oxford professor who translated the Bible into English, and people were pissed. They had to hide it. It's still in Oxford, the first English Bible. So crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, matter of fact, yesterday I was studying the the saint that introduced Christianity to uh the UK. It wasn't called the UK back then.
Yeah.
Um, it was like I was about to say it's at 100 BC, but that wouldn't make any sense because yeah, it was like in the 1600s or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so much history in there. I love, yeah, me, I've been to London. It's not Oxford necessarily, but I love the culture there, the history there. So, yeah, nice
Charles,
little time to have a
your
breather.
favorite books? What's one of your favorite books on like, history or something? You had talked about reading some books on, I forget the name that you mentioned, but do you have a book you recommend for me? I love books,
Yeah,
by the way, so we can probably
yes.
talk all day on books.
Well, I'd recommend Wikipedia straight up. It's like the best rabbit hole ever because you let your curiosity guide you and it's faster
Yeah.
moving. My
Yeah.
book, and that proves my last point in terms of history, is The Making of the Atomic Bomb. Now it's a bit less trendy since the Oppenheimer movie, but it's a 35-hour book and it's by Richard Rhodes.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, it's 35 hours. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, lots of time, lots of dedication, but it is very interesting. It covers political aspect of making the bomb,
Yeah.
engineering, lots of engineering, business aspect of it. So it's quite fascinating. But if like Wikipedia, for example, if you can study like individual bombs, you can study the
Yeah.
individuals, not only Oppenheimer, you can study Einstein. So generally nowadays, I do recommend more Wikipedia. What are yours?
Historically, there's two books that I love. One is called The Road to Paradise, The Last Road to Paradise, which is a book about this guy. I'm blanking on his name right now, which is embarrassing because I'm a Floridian and I should know his name. Flagler. Flagler was
Henry.
Henry Rockefeller's Henry Flagler was Rockefeller's business partner, and he's the guy who built all the trains and stuff. It's an amazing story. And then the one that I just read a couple of weeks ago, which was so freaking good, Charles, was The Mysterious Case of Rudolph Diesel. And it was about the guy that invented the diesel engine. And like when you think about that, right? That you look at all these historical greats and Diesel never comes up. He's like nobody you hear about Tesla, you hear about Einstein, you hear about, but nobody mentions Diesel, and he did something as equally significant as all the others, and there's a reason why. And the book goes into his mysterious death, and oh, it's an amazing book. It reads just like a whodunit. It's pretty cool.
So diesel is like a different combustible than gas. Does it come from tree as well? Where does diesel come from? I need to study
Uh,
diesel.
well, I'm going to totally screw it up here, but basically, because even diesel that we use today is not the original diesel that he invented. The original diesel that he invented was used using coconut oil. You could use
Oh.
any oil, palm oil, coconut oil, and to this day, you can still actually. I've got a buddy of mine. I call him Redneck Ryan. He actually takes saturated fat, like all the oils and stuff, and he
Yeah.
cleans them and he uses it as fuel. You can use it as a
Whoa.
biofuel, but yeah, it's
It's
like
gonna cost a lot.
yeah, it doesn't ignite. It's not flammable. So there's all these amazing like there's zero emissions with his original diesel engine and stuff. It had all these really cool things, and it goes into how the Rockefellers went against him and pushed because they knew that he was going to be a threat to the oil industry and all this stuff. It's a really cool book. Yeah,
It was really rough business back then, there weren't
yeah,
many laws and courts
yep,
and so forth. It was ghetto. It's a bit like here in Mexico, like you and I think I prefer things that way, wild individual like myself. But yeah, there's also benefits, and that's how you scale a society, an equitable society, because else you get oligarchs all over the place.
yeah.
What are you
You're in
seeing in
Waka,
the
Awaka. How do you say where
Oaxaca,
you're? Oaxaca.
Oaxaca or Wakanda, depending
Yeah.
on how you want to phrase it. But what are you seeing nowadays in this world as problems and the sources of these problems that as someone that ran for office?
One is that ideology has taken over policy, right? Nowadays, we've, especially in America, but it seems to be all over. It seems like we can't have an intelligent conversation with somebody who has a differencing viewpoint because we've become such an overly sensitive society that if we question a policy, somehow we're questioning the integrity of the human. And I think that we've really got to get away from that. There's two books which I think are amazing. One is called The Coddling of the American Mind, and by Greg Lukianoff, and then another one is called his latest book called The Canceling of the American Mind, and it addresses those issues. Because if you think about it nowadays, like now and you probably see it most with the MAGA people, right? It's such an identity for them, right? It's no longer about policy. It's about this is my tribe and who I am. I think that's probably one of our biggest problems is that we've become more focused and obsessed with identity than we have with policy. And I think that's the result of the fact that we're just in this new age, like the information age died around 2010, and now we're in what I call the collaboration age, where it's not about what you know, it's about who you know and who you are. And everybody's focused on the who aspect of things. And we do business with people because of who they are, not because of what they can do or what they know or what service they can provide. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing all around, but I think we're on one end of the pendulum and we need to bring it back down more in the middle. I think that's probably one of our big, all of the other problems are almost a result of that idealism that just doesn't allow any room for negotiation whatsoever.
Yeah, it's important to have some identity, but people have way too much ego nowadays.
Yeah.
They're firm and they're like if you're a firm UFC fighter, you'll get knocked out because you're not moving. Some people even step in punches instead of
Yeah.
dodging them. So yeah, be more flexible, be more like water, like
Yeah.
Bruce Lee said.
Bruce
So
Lee. Yeah.
more data pieces as well. Yeah, be open to sparring and having some kind of system to filter that information. I think there's so much disinformation, sometimes state sponsored, sadly, but mostly just humans being humans that is flowing out there and is just tarnishing the whole um, knowledge pool of humanity, and science is kind of taking the sides nowadays. People are claiming stuff instead of looking it up for real.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can relate also to being on the other side of that. Like, for example, people that don't like or use AI, I'm like, dudes, should we even hang out if you're not using AI? Um, like my friend, is building this business, it's failing, and telling him like, why don't you have a sounding board? Like use ChatGPT, and he's like, no, think these things are gonna kill us. But you might be right, but means some sense of reality as well, and using the technology that's available. It's like not using an iPhone, for example. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I have a lot
Yeah.
of things on the topic. Where can people find out more about you, Topher?
I think go to tophermorrison.com. The good thing about having a really unique name like Topher Morrison is pretty much they can just search that and the website will pop up or the YouTube channel will pop up or the social media channel will pop up. So yeah, it's pretty easy, but tophermorrison.com is the easiest way to reach me. Yeah.